Without further ado, I'm going to introduce my first speaker, Carrie Gerstenberger, and she is going to take it away.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, I think Bud Henson, could you please mute yourself? It looks like we're getting some feedback. Or if somebody, oh, perfect. So if you're not speaking, go ahead and mute. I think Jerry G is the last person also. So I actually have a presentation to share, but it says, April, that I can't share until you stop sharing. So let's see how this goes.
You should be able to share it. Sorry.
Perfect.
I was trying to mute people.
Oh, perfect. Well, as April said, my name is Carrie Gerstenberger, and thanks for joining us today. I am going to try and move this. Okay. I'm an associate specifier at Bassetti Architects, and I have experience writing technical documents as well as designing for both private and public sectors, which is going to be a major theme in this review today. I've worked at places like Perkins & Will, ZGF, and BBJ, and now Bassetti. And I've been able to collaborate on projects for ranging from Children's Hospital to Google to REI, Alaska headquarters, and now mostly just K through 12 projects, which is really rewarding. I really got into specifying when I figured out that I could fully detail designs and really design based on the requirements listed in the spec. And it was really exciting for me. And so I made this jump about 4.5 years ago into being solely specifier. And it's just, I'm obsessed with it. It's so great. If you're really logical like me and love organization, it's a great outlet for that, I should say. So April kind of preempted this. Today I'll be reviewing the project requirements, what they are, where they come from, and how public and private sectors change the expectations for both, which is what this is listed here. So moving on, what are project requirements? They seem to be something that everybody is constantly talking about, but where do they actually come from? Who actually decides what is considered a project requirement? And as a specifier, what's our role in documenting them? So in their simplest form, a project requirement is just an expectation and a standard established by the client. So these expectations can be derived from past or current experiences with products and methods, funding requirements, and even recommendations from the owner's legal counsel. So it's helpful to think about public versus private sector when you're considering how and where to start gathering project requirements for a new project. So we'll start with publicly funded projects. So publicly funded work automatically has different requirements for the project, since it's using bonds and public money to pay for the work. So not all of the design decisions are purely the client's decision. For example, in order for public schools in Washington to receive state funding, they actually have to participate in a sustainability program called the Washington Sustainable School Protocol. For shorthand, I'll call it WSSP. So WSSP is this building guide for new and modernization school construction projects. And it has a scorecard really similar to LEED. So there are sustainable focused credits that we need to actually meet. There are material credits, daylighting credits, construction waste requirements, and in order for the project to actually get state funding, it's a requirement that we participate in WSSP. And all of the documentation and proof of the credit compliance is also required after construction, just like a LEED project. And so this is an example of how the source of funding is actually becoming a project requirement because we're required to participate in this program. So federal agencies are even more prescriptive than just public work jobs. Often they have their own guide specs that the AE firm has to work off of as the base masters for a project. Federal agencies have standards that encompass social values, which might come as a surprise. Actually, there are tax benefits to a project when the products are supplied by special interest groups, like minority or women-owned businesses that are local. So regulations like wage rates and labor standards also help establish project requirements for federal agencies. So this could look like sourcing from businesses that participate in a union, or the Buy American Act is another requirement for federal agencies, which basically gives advantages to American companies and heavily taxes imported products. So these federal agency requirements will affect product materiality of a project, both aesthetically, but also based on availability of a product type. So project teams need to be aware of these really prescriptive requirements that are established by the owner prior to materiality selection. So some firms who regularly work with in the public sector or with federal agencies will often write their master specifications for the office to encompass some of these reoccurring requirements. So where I work at Bassetti, we've updated most of our master documents with products that directly address reoccurring project requirements, such as recycled content for WSSP, as an example. So from the specifier's perspective, the documentation of the products will actually look different for federal and publicly funded projects. So for federal agencies, they prohibit the use of proprietary information. So basically, you can't use a manufacturer's name or product name in the specs. So this is hugely different than what a lot of people are used to seeing. This regulation is in place just to encourage unlimited competition for projects and ensure opportunity to any bidder who has a qualifying product. So you might be wondering, how then does one design a finished product or make final design decisions? Well, naturally, there are a few exceptions to this no proprietary rule. So one, you can list a specific product if there is no other way of describing the essential function or characteristic of the product. For example, you can call out Sherwin-Williams Dover White, since there is no other way to describe that product. And calling out the color will still allow other manufacturers to color match if they'd like. The second way that you can call out a basis of design in the specs for federal agencies or public work is if an agency is connecting or extending an existing system. So an example of this is if they have a roof system that they're trying to expand in order to ensure compatibility and sometimes warranty, you can match the existing system. So this would be an acceptable case where you could list the actual system and say there are no substitutions allowed. And the third and last exception to this no proprietary rule is when the specs, somewhere in the specs, there's a statement, generally up in division 01, that clearly states that any products that are listed in the spec are only there to just identify, say, salient features of that product type. So this will allow substitutions for any product that's listed. And basically this one sentence in the document stating that substitutions are allowed will help open up that no proprietary rule. So as you can see, there are project requirements for federal agencies that are really quite prescriptive. Some of them are due to funding, some of them are due to encouraging unlimited competition. And these requirements have really been developed over time just to allow for the most inclusivity possible. So developing a project manual for a federal agency requires attention to detail and often a lot more collaboration and review from the owner just to ensure compliance. So some agencies might require a firm, like I mentioned, to use their master documents, and then the AE firm will just need to use track changes to indicate any additions and deletions, which are then reviewed prior to issuing the final documentation for bid. So federal agencies also have specific requirements for administering CA, construction administration, that are different than private jobs. So that those sections up in Division 1 will also need to be modified. So the biggest takeaway from this project requirement documentation for federal agencies and public work is that there are a lot more prescriptive things to do for public works versus the private sector. So why don't we go ahead and jump into the private sector? But first, this is going to require some participation. There's a quick quiz. I really like quick quizzes just to make sure people are listening. So when you know the answer, please just unmute or type in the chat. So the question is, when you're specifying for federal agencies, you can never use proprietary language unless, one, there are no exceptions, calling out the manufacturer name and or products is never allowed. Two, there is no other way of describing the essential function or characteristic of the product. Or three, specs have a statement clearly stating that substitutions are not allowed. So go ahead and unmute if you think you know, or write in the chat. And I don't know where the chat is. Oh, great. Let's go over here. 2, 2, 2, lots of twos. So that is correct. Thank you for participating. That helps. The answer is 2. You can call out a product if there is no other way of describing it, such as color. All right, so now you might assume that project requirements in the private sector are a lot less stringent, and you would only be partially correct. The private sector's project requirements might be completely owner-driven. However, for more established owners or larger projects, the owner's experiences with specific methods of installation and or products often influence their standards and expectations. For example, Alaska Airlines as a company has written standards for which manufacturers they allow products from. Period, paragraph. They have a list. Generally, these standards are derived from negative or positive experiences. So the owner can choose on a project-to-project basis what they're willing to accept if the product deviates from their accepted list, which is different than in the public sector. So since the project is internally funded, the owner is more flexible when accepting alternate products and solutions. So requirements sometimes arise when there are pre-established signed contracts with specific manufacturers. This will really limit what products the designers can choose from. And as such, the designers really need to be aware of the standards prior to the start of material selection. So these contracts are often signed just to lock in pricing for the owner and to ensure compatibility and maintenance of future systems. Private sector owners also can be less experienced with the design process and construction administration. And as such, they might rely more heavily on the AE firm expertise just to walk them through how these processes happen. The owner also might not have knowledge enough to review specifications or provide additional content for the bidding and procurement phase, such as, when this happens, the architect really has the ability to curate the documents to fit exactly the needs of the owner based on the size of the project. So when documenting project requirements for the private sector, the specifier should really be aware of the owner's experience and be prepared to have a page-turn conversation with the owner, reviewing the front end where the standards and requirements for the project and procurement is listed. So private sector project requirements can range from really restrictive to completely non-restrictive. Division 0, 0, and 0, 1, I've mentioned a couple times. This is what is generally referred to as the front end. These divisions encompass the majority of the overarching project requirements and procedures. So the motto for spec writing is say it once and say it in the right spot. Our goal is to say it once and not repeat it in every section. So division 0, 0, and really division 1 is where we want to capture these overarching project requirements that apply to all the subsequent sections. So for example of this concept, we can take the 012500, which is the substitution procedure section. So for private sector projects, the section might be modified to read no substitutions allowed unless indicated otherwise in an individual specification section. So private sector projects can totally limit competition if they choose. However, as we reviewed in the public works, they don't have that luxury. As such, the substitution procedure section will read something like, architect will consider requests for substitutions if received within 60 days after commencement of the work. So between these two extremes, there is a lot of choices and variations, and that division 01 is really where you can capture a lot of the project requirements. All right, so this is the final review quiz. We have 3 questions. Just like before, if you know the answer, please either unmute or write into the chat. So the first question is, who or what determines project requirements? Is it 1, owner legal team, 2, standards based on past experiences with products or methods, 3, the source of funding, or 4, the AHJ? What do you guys think? Getting some 2s. Man, I think I like the number 2. What do you guys think? So the correct answer is actually all of them. So if you guessed, good job. Funding, past experiences, the AHJ, and the legal team can all have a say in project requirements. All right, question B. When specifying for public sector projects, you need to 1, assume the owner has no standard products or preferred methods. 2, determine if the owner has the division 00 or 01 sections to work from to establish project requirements. 3, always specify by product name and manufacturer. 4, incorporate standards just before bidding. So when specifying for public sector projects, you need to what? Oh my gosh, what if it's 2? It is 2. I love 2. That's pretty funny, actually. I didn't realize I only chose 2. All right, you guys are correct. So when specifying for public sector projects, you need to determine if the owner has a front end that already outlines project requirements. And as mentioned, it's really important to let the project team know what those requirements are if they already don't know, as it might affect their material selection. And it will also help you as a specifier be able to pick out instances where there might be non-compliant products. And last question, private sector project requirements are usually flexible, true or false? Yay, that's correct. Number 1, private sector project requirements are usually flexible. All right, well, thank you guys very much for participating in this quick review of what project requirements are and where they come from, and a little bit on how public versus private can significantly change the source of requirements. Feel free to reach out to me with any follow-up questions or comments, or about specifying in general. I love my job. So I will go ahead and pass it over to Marc.
Okay, I'm going to unmute. Great. Thank you very much, Carrie. That was a lot of fun. That was good. It was good seeing you again.
Yeah.
Now, are you still here in Seattle?
Oh, no.
You're in
I
Portland.
I
Where are you?
I
Where are
moved to
you?
Portland.
You're in your living room somewhere. Okay.
I'm in
Oh,
my
Portland.
office. Yeah.
Cool. All right, Portland's a great town. All right,
Yeah.
I'm going to share screens, I think. Here, let's go that screen and share. And then I'm going to maximize this other screen so I can hit the clicky do thing and motivate along. Now, I'm going to talk about something completely different. Non-graphic information, specs, is, well, those of us who've been specifiers, we consider that pretty important. It's the quality that goes along with the quantity that we show on the drawings. 30-foot tall, 100-foot long brick wall. Great. What kind of brick? What kind of mortar? What kind of sealer, if any? What kind of, if there's going to put, a stain on it? There's any number of things you can do to brick. A lot of that's not going to be on the drawings. It's going to be in the specs. And as buildings get more complex, we're going to have to manage that information a little bit better. So I'm going to talk about level of development, or LOD, and then I'm going to talk about a little modification that I made to it to deal with the way Life really works. So these were the learning objectives I sent in to April here a little while ago. We're going to talk about LOD, and then I'm going to talk about level of specification. Amazing, you would never think I came up with that. And then the relationship between the two. So let's motivate along. I think you're all aware of the complexities of the construction industry. Phase construction, multiplicity of team members. This affects any method of documentation due to the different levels of development for specific systems or assemblies to meet the purpose of the submission, construction, and later management of the property. LOD, well, let me start at the beginning here. Graphical 3D as well as 4D and 5D information is now an accepted part of any BIM. The AEC community now needs to incorporate the non-graphical information required to design, construct, and manage a facility into systems with what is compatible and currently in use for graphical elements in BIM. The LOD specification maintained by BIM Forum is the best current system for model element management in the USA. Now I'm going to pause for half a second. Well, why do I care about model element management? Because pretty much all you folks are working in Revit, whether you want to be in Revit or not. Some smaller firms are still working in AutoCAD. That's one reason. Second reason, the contractors are all using BIM because the contractors can make money using BIM every day. Every conflict, every clash that can be detected and caught before you build it saves the contractor money right this minute. Revit may not save you any money. It may cost you more money to design and build in Revit, but in the end, it's going to help the job. So we need to look at a way of the architects and engineers getting kind of into the system and working with those model elements so that we can create a model that's useful to the owner in the end. Now, there are some changes to that we need to make, which I'll mention really quickly, and then I'll move on with the presentation. And the biggest one is, for the most part, our models have not been reliable. In fact, we don't get paid to build a reliable model. We get paid to build a PDF set that gets submitted to the city of Seattle. City of Seattle doesn't demand a BIM. They demand a set of 2D representations via PDF in their electronic portal. That's our requirement to get the permission slip to build. But I think we need to think larger than that. We need to think about what's best for the owner in building their facility. Okay, so moving on. So the LOD specification states, it is possible to infer or extract information from a BIM that the author doesn't intend. Unconfirmed dimensions can be measured with precision. Assembly information often exists before it's been finalized, etc. In the past, this issue has been sidestepped with all-encompassing disclaimers of non-reliability in the BIM. I'm not saying that we have to put the non-graphical information one place or another, but how it's used, now it's organized, needs to be thought about. The traditional three-part specification and design, bid, build, delivery method with output in a three-ring binder. Neither the delivery method nor the three-ring binder mentioned, or here's right just half a second ago, accurately portray the huge variety of delivery methods or documentation needs of today's or the future's design and construction environment. Now, the LOD document, which, by the way, you used to be able to just go to bimforum.org, I believe, but just Google BIM Forum or LOD and get to their document free for nothing. You can just go grab it off their website. Now you have to register. Still think it's free. It doesn't cost any money, but you have to go to their website and register to download it. The document doesn't address dealing with traditional specifications. Throughout, it does say, as I have circled here, non-graphic information may also be attached to the model element. Well, thanks a lot. But we really need that quality to go with the quantity to have a complete product. They have two parts to the LOD. They have a book, and I'll show you some clips from that in a second. And they do have a second part, which is a spreadsheet, which I'll also get into, that does have a place for some of that non-graphic information. Now, where did all this come from? Why are we bothering? Well, the AIA did this to us. The LOD specification expands upon the LOD schema developed by the AIA for their original E202 documents back in 2009, and currently in the G202 2013 Project BIM protocol form, by providing some definitions and illustrations of the BIM elements of different building systems at different stages of their development, and that we could use in design and the construction process. So this little clip is from the AIA's document, and it says, we have different, they define different levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then they develop milestones that you could hit. So the architect is going to take such an element to level 2 and then turn it over to the contractor. Great, well, wonderful. What's level 2? Where does level 2, what does it encompass? What's supposed to be there? So let's take a look at some of that. We've always had the model be a for reference only thing. And I think something that we can't address in today's talk, but should be addressed in architect and engineering offices everywhere, is that for the best job possible, it needs to become reliable. Architects and engineers, you should be pushing your owner to pay you appropriately to make it reliable. Now, that doesn't mean that that model has to be, as we would have thought about in the old days, 100% perfect construction drawings and therefore ready to go to the contractor. I'll use it as an example, curtain wall. Curtain wall has a lot of very important requirements, but many of them aren't drawn. The structural loads, the wind loads, things that the curtain wall manufacturer is going to have to take into account when they engineer and stamp their drawings for the curtain wall. What the architect needs to draw, essentially, is a set of good elevations. We don't necessarily need to draw every single detail for the curtain wall. So our level of development can be quite low when we turn it over to the next step, which is the curtain wall manufacturer. Hopefully you've been reading ahead here. We want to be able to rely on the model. We want to be able to use it for different things. We want to be able to help sequencing move along. And we want to avoid over modeling. Nobody, including the contractor, including the trade subcontractors, is modeling every little fastener, is modeling every little thing. At some point, it's the person in the field with the hammer in their hand who is making that final decision, as it should be. There's no reason to overdraw. Everybody gets taught not to overdraw, but inevitably we end up doing a lot of that. Here's a little glance at the LOD schema. The AIA developed it to be more systematic in how we do things and to make things more reliable and to help people know what they were going to get. The LOD took AIA's schema and developed it with some definition to really help it mean something to someone modeling, or in our purpose, specifying products. So its primary objectives: to help teams build deliverables, to help managers explain to their teams what we need to make and what we need to do with it, to allow the downstream users, again, I'm using that word, rely upon the information they're getting, and to provide a standard that can be referenced in contracts and BIM execution plans. Note that estimating requires knowledge of the element's quality as well as quantity. Here's all the things that the LOD can do. If you're specifying that quality, there's 3 different qualities of brick. We usually use the best quality, but you could specify one less. We can all specify the highest quality of paint or a lower quality paint, a higher quality flooring, a lower quality flooring, but it may be the same color. It may still be sheet material. It may still look the same. The LOD is organized via uniformat. And here's a little in blue, a little picture of uniformat. It's CSI's version of uniformat 2010, with some classes expanded to level 4 and a few cases to 5. It only addresses the LOD 100 through 400 of the AIA schema and introduces a new level, LOD 350, to better address information required for effective trade coordination. It does not address LOD 500, since that really talks about field verification and isn't an indication of the progression of the model or a higher level of geometry or information. And lastly, it does not prescribe who the author is of a particular component at a given LOD. That's up to you and your team members, you and the contractor and the curtain wall engineer. Get together and make a decision about, what am I going to produce at the architect's office? What am I going to hand over to the curtain wall engineer? What is the curtain wall engineer going to hand over to the general contractor when they're finished for the assembly of the curtain wall on site? So here's a little quick list of the different LOD levels. So LOD 100, nothing even has been drawn yet, just the element exists. Level 200, maybe a generic placeholder. Level 3, etc. You can read here. I think we've really helped. We're getting pretty plugged down here. And again, I've added the emphasis in blue. That's not what they had done in their document. So let's look at this in a little more detail. So here's an LOD. I just went to concrete. So it's A, substructure 1010. Here's LOD 100. It just makes we have some concrete. There's no picture has been drawn. There's concrete on the job. At LOD 200, you can see in the little picture here, we have a slab and we have some kind of foundation. This would be the crudest variety of calculating by yards of concrete, perhaps. By LOD 300, we're really beginning to put a little bit of detail in there. We know that we've got the footing, we've got a stem wall, we have a slab, we've got some pieces. When we move to the next level, okay, now we've got some keys shown, we've got some rebar shown. This is pretty much where all of us in the design world would stop. This is I mean, essentially you'd have some dimensions on there, but this is the end of our drawing effort. We would quit right there. And 400, we would have the rebar shops come back and dowels, coursing, if it's masonry, the reinforcing, waterproofing can be shown. Let's take a little more concrete example. Here's a door slab. It's 100. There's going to be about 200 doors on the building. That's it, 200 doors. We don't know anything else. Level 200 in the LOD. So this is graphically, we're going to show a simple monolithic slab. And you can see we get more detailed as we go down. Level 400, obviously we have extrusions, final sizes, connections, sealants, thresholds, all the little pieces at least are bundled with it. Now, moving along quickly, this is a clip from their little spreadsheet. It's very detailed. It's got more bits and pieces to a spreadsheet than I'd ever seen in my entire life. It takes each of the uniformat levels and lays them out. It also uses OmniClass. If you're into OmniClass, not many people know or care about OmniClass, but it's out there as well. It's a different lecture. Here's the fun part. And I'll just take a look at this. Here's this little spreadsheet. It's got some mauvey, pinky, you name the color, up at the top. Now, you can see it says baseline. So as far as LOD is concerned, that mauvey pink area, these are the things that they really want to know. Everything else is optional. Okay, they want to know compressive strength, steel flexure, I'm not sure why steel flexure, and shear. Okay, good. Those are good basic numbers. We'd want to have those. But it says everything underneath it is kind of like, well, maybe. So things like air entrainment, aggregate size, specific deck material, fasteners, weld specifications, camber. There's lots of things, listed. And I started looking at this and I went, well, okay, but that list isn't very complete, because there's things that can affect time and schedule in concrete that are never shown. As an example, I worked on several buildings for UC San Diego. UC San Diego likes white cement concrete, and they like to have mock-up panels done out of sequence and before the rest of the schedule gets going. That's a significant expense to the general contractor, and we're going to put it in our specifications, the requirements for that mock-up, how many panels, what we're doing with the finish, et cetera, et cetera. That's time and money. It's going to affect the estimate. It's going to affect their bid for the concrete work. So in red here, I've put in a whole bunch of stuff. Now, for the most part, pre-installation meetings, are they going to cost time and money? 99% of the time, they are not. But there might be 1% of the time where they do cost time and money, in which case I would say use them. Mock-ups, I just talked about mock-ups. Field conditions that might be extraordinary, that the contractor has to pay attention to, might be important. There might be something perverse about the formwork. I had a friend of mine years ago that the formwork for the job was essentially finish carpentry, very complex, very delicate finish carpentry that had to be looked at. And then, of course, destroyed as you pulled the formwork off. So it wasn't just plywood or steel forms with backing to hold it in place. It was very expensive. But if you didn't say that to the general contractor, you just said concrete with formwork, they're going to make very logical assumptions about steel pans or plywood or maybe board formed. And then they're going to be done with what they think of as the estimate for concrete. But that was not the case on that particular building. So I've added things here in red that were not in their original, in LOD's original layout. And I've also put them in the traditional 3-part format to get most of the things in, which I think are also most of the expenses. And this could be done for all the big assemblies in the LOD spreadsheet. Need to have this done to them. Your BIM manager is probably building a BIM execution plan for the job. They should be using LOD in that BIM execution plan for the job. You folks should be, if you're writing specifications, thinking about using a level of specification along with that. We're going to get to that here in just a second. So just for you who don't know, uniformat does tie to master format. So uniformat assemblies, we talked about concrete, A1010.10 wall foundations. Okay, continuous footings in cast place concrete section pops up. Obviously a formwork section or a rebar section would go along with it if you don't put those in your concrete section. It could be precast, it could be unit masonry in a small house. They could be treated wood foundations, which I didn't even really know existed, but they do actually exist. There could be spread footings. There's a bunch of specification sections that can come along with that underneath or inside of that assembly, that wall foundation, that need to be accounted for. And the uniformat document has great lists of potential, not necessary, but potential traditional master format specification sections in each of the assemblies that it lays out. So let's look at one of my little brain children here. So we built a level of specification. Schedule impact and cost, these need to be dealt with. So I mentioned that before. We've got the assembly, we've got master format sections that go in the assembly. We want to include things that are going to affect schedule and cost. These could be, and I list them here, maintenance, installation, testing, mock-ups. All these things could affect them. And they're going to modify those meanings of the LOD earlier. So each uniformat, each LOS, built from a master format core building into the uniformat assembly. BIM and Revit, which is 99% of the BIMs out there, works in assemblies. And if you look in any of the property dialog boxes, grab an assembly, a generic assembly in Revit, and open up the properties dialog box. And about 3/4 of the way down that property, you'll see a uniformat assembly, the number may not be exactly the same as you're expecting, but it's in there. It's buried in Revit. It's not just a keynote attached in a text file list. It's in the family assembly. So here's a rough equivalent of the LOSs. And I had these one way here a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to Anna Whitaker down in San Francisco, and we modified them a little bit. Now, these aren't set in stone. The whole point of LOD and the whole point of LOS is that you and your team, and by that I mean your owner, your builder, your trade sub, and you, the designer, work together to define what am I going to create, what am I going to hand over to you, what are you then going to create, add to that, not have to throw it away and redo it, but add to that and move to the next and hand it off to the next person so that we build up. We don't simply build, throw it away, build again, throw it away. To everyone here in this audience, how many project narratives have you written and then tossed to do the schematic design spec, and then tossed to do the design development spec, and then tossed to do the final specs? What a waste of time. So again, LOS 100, it's an annotated table of contents. It's a little project narrative. We would like to then build on that to do a preliminary project description. If you want to use CSI's PPD format, that'd be great. Want to use something else, equally fine. LOS 300, really these are 80% done. They're fully edited specification sections, not customized for a particular job. These might be your office masters. With the, we could talk about signal to noise. You want to get the most bang for the buck out of an office master. Will every decision be made in an office master specification? Well, no, because every building is a little different. But much like every person is different, but for the most part, we all start off with 10 fingers and toes, feet, arms, legs, head, torso. Those parts are pretty much the same every time. I would say your office master should be that generic analog person, and then modify it with hair length. Wish I had hair to have length. You know, you add the other pieces to make the final specification. LOS 300, tailored for a specific project. This is pretty much your final specification. 400, we got the submitted products and processes included with that. These are where the shop drawings are coming back at you. The submittals are coming back at you. You filed them away in the folder. Or if the contractors, if it's a construction management job, the contractor is taking our non-graphic material and adding this other non-graphic material as well as the drawings into an LOS 400. And then 500, this is turned over to the owner. These are the maintenance materials, the things they're going to use to maintain the product, the building, the facility over time. So there's some basic questions here. I think hopefully I've answered some of them, but if not, I've answered them again here in this in these last couple of slides. Well, what if the graphic content and the non-graphic content are at the same level? Well, I don't think they're going to be. I think in many traditional spec sections and in many assemblies, they're going to be very different. Who decides which is right? The team decides. It's the team project. There is no such thing as a master builder. There probably never was, but if there was, it was a long time ago with many fewer materials. You have to be paying attention to that trade subcontractor. That person who can stand on their knees and lays the tile knows more about laying that tile than you do. You need to pay attention to them. Likewise, you're liable to know more about design and conceptually what you wanted to have in that building than they do. You have to work together as a team to get the thing built. Can they be different and still serve the purpose? Absolutely. In fact, we encourage, as far as I'm concerned, would encourage you, like the curtain wall example, to have a very complete request for proposals for your curtain wall people, including all those, the structural loads and the wind loads and the seismic importance factor, all the stuff the curtain wall manufacturer is going to have to take into account to give back a decent bid, a decent proposal for the curtain wall. But as far as drawings are concerned, you know, Bud can talk to us later about it, but I think a decent elevation is just about all they need. How do we know a piece of information in conjunction with other pieces go well? Well, because you agree upon them with the contractor and the designer, you engage the other parties as needed. Kind of already jumped the gun on that one. What can be preset? Define the problems inherent in determining different LODs for different materials and assemblies. Of course, project to project, they're going to change. You should probably be using pull planning, or to toss some other buzzwords in there, Scrum framework processes to look at what can your team do in a particular length of time, what decisions are determined by other decisions and in what sequence, so that we know that if we determine this on this day, then we can determine this on this day, and walk yourself back from the day you turn it over to the owner to the day you start designing, which is pull planning in 2 sentences. And again, follow the money. It's going to solve a lot of problems. Innovative product or process. So a brand new something. Can these be specified by performance requirements only? Well, how do you do that now? It's probably going to be the same in this system. If it doesn't exist, you're going to have to put out performance requirements and then see what comes back, or work with your contractor and owner in design to figure out that new system. Prefabricated items. I just helped the Northwest Wall and Seating Bureau on their jury for their awards this year. Of the maybe 15 or 20 different companies that presented projects, a lot of them were panelized. Well, what section does that go in? What section does panelized exterior wall go in? Well, Division 13, well, this is not a Butler building. This is not, a machine-made, factory-made product that's coming off on a single back of a truck. It was the unique design that the architect and the engineer came up with. But then that unique design was then broken down, panelized, assembled in a weather-controlled facility, so you get higher quality, and then brought to the field on the weekend and hung, because they didn't have lots of place to store materials. We're dealing with a world that is getting more and more assembly-based. We need to be more and more assembly-based, and that means, if not uniformat, something other format. We're going to have to come up with something that gets us to assemblies. Prefabricated or manufactured or fab by the team is absolutely coming down the road, and it's coming down faster than a lot of architects realize. So LOD is a reference tool, can really help us organize our graphic material, and then we can use LOS to help us organize our non-graphic material to build a successful project. So we've got 8 minutes, and I got the question slide up. So scream, yell, hop up and down, tell me I'm wrong, ask me questions. Ask Carrie questions if you've got any more questions for her, because we've got a couple of minutes. And I'll stop sharing. There we go. Now I get a full picture of Carrie. I'm not sure Carrie's ready for that, but you're filling my screen. Hi. Nobody has questions. Let me open up the chat, see if somebody's like, why the hell? No, we just see 1s and 2s. Anyway, hopefully that was clear. Our new product deals with assemblies. It's assembly based. I should say, can't say our new product anymore because I retired. I no longer work for Deltek, but their new product does that. I know that Beth was gone Monday and Tuesday working with the folks who took over, was RIB, who took over for BSD. They're chewing away on the future of their product. Life is going to be in a database, folks. It will be in a database, which is why I used BSD's product for years, because it's in a database. Specifications are going to be in a database. Why did we have a 3-ring binder with an outline format? Because everything was printed in a book and you wanted to be able to find stuff in the same place every time. Great. What do you do if you want to ask a database a question? You just ask the database a question. You open up a query. What are my submittals? When are they due? How many are there? Which submittals for which products? And the computer spits out lists. We don't need a 3-ring binder anymore. We don't need an outline format anymore. Just saying.
Alrighty, so are there any more questions? I'm going to give a second just because I know sometimes there's technical difficulties with grabbing the microphones off or turning them back on, I guess. Mine's now at the top of my screen. So I was like, why can't I turn my microphone back on? Found it. All righty. Well, thank you so much to Carrie and Mark. That was awesome and very informative. And like I said earlier, we will have, this was recorded, so we will have this on our YouTube channel if you guys want to use it for reference or share it with a friend. But thank you so much, you guys. And Mark, congrats on your retirement. And Carrie, I know it's been, you know, a little bit, but congrats on your move. And I do miss you in Puget Sound, but I'll have to come down there and say hello.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And make sure that you guys are subscribed to get the Puget Sound chapter spectrum every month, because that will have the information for next class, or else make sure that you're following and on LinkedIn, because that's where we will also post it as well. So I hope to see you guys next time. Oh, it looks like, oh, okay, great. Perfect. Your guys' emails are in the chat box. So thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you next time.